Can you hear me and see the screen?
All good, all good.
Yes, we can all hear you.
Okay. All right. So till now we have been for the past few weeks, we have been studying the book of Numbers. Just a very tiny recap that Numbers uh, has is named because it has two censuses that were taken. But other than that, there's a lot of information about the journeys that the children of Israel made. And the book of Numbers is quoted and used as a reference in New Testament to warn believers about what not to do in their journey of faith. So all the things that the people of Israel did and spoke and behaved during the journey to the promised land is taken as an example for New Testament believers on how to behave in the house of God, how to view the journey of faith, and how to live faithfully and please God, and what not to do. So it's taken as used as a warning for the church. Now, last time we ended at chapter 12. We had just begun it. In chapter 11, we saw how the people rebelled against God, and in chapter 12, we see how the leaders in Israel rebelled against God. So it starts with Moses' own family and Miriam and Aaron. And we saw that it was basically Miriam who started the grumbling. Aaron just joined along. And the reason for the reason which Miriam started the grumbling or the was because she was not happy that Moses married an Ethiopian woman. So she took that as a reason. But fundamentally, in chapter 12, verse 2, we see her speaking that has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? So basically, she wanted equality in leadership with Moses. That is that sentence statement she made is an indication of what was really bothering her. So one of the reasons we could see is that just before this rebellion from Miriam, we see that God took 70 elders from the nation of Israel and anointed them with the Holy Spirit so that they started prophesying. And we saw last time that this anointing was rare in the Old Testament. It was very exclusive, and prophesying and all was very limited to few people. So this was a very big deal. And probably Miriam would have felt left out, or Miriam would have somehow felt insecure because now suddenly there are 70 more people who are anointed. And so that might have been a trigger or a cause. But anyways, whatever might have been the trigger, her desire was equal leadership with Moses. That's why she says, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? But Moses, we saw that Moses was not a person who would grasp his leadership or who will protect his leadership. He was willing to let go of his leadership. He was not at all insecure, or he was not at all possessive about the leadership position. Okay, his only desire was to serve God, and he did that faithfully. So when Miriam and Aaron started speaking against Moses, in all probability, Moses would not have resisted their grumbling. Okay. For what we do not know what would have happened or what happened, because it says that the Lord suddenly spoke to all three of them. So the word suddenly, like I mentioned last time, indicates that the Lord did not allow a long time to pass between when Miriam grumbled and the Lord intervened. There was not a long time that passed. He very quickly intervened. He spoke on behalf of Moses and he called them. And in some of the translations, or probably in King James translations, we will see that when the Lord speaks, it is not given as a statement. It is given in, shorter text, like a poem. So those are when the Lord is speaking. Those kind of texts, even though for us it is like a narration, in the original language it is actually a poem or a song. So when God was speaking to the three of them, he spoke in a poetic language, which indicates that he was deeply hurt in his heart when he heard Miriam speak in this manner. Okay. So he spoke in that because it speaks about his emotions. When he spoke in a poetic way, wherever we see further in other parts of the Bible, in the prophetic books, we will see God speaking in a poetic language. And in other places, we will see him speaking in statements and narration. So wherever he's speaking in a poetic language, that means his emotions have been touched and he is deeply moved. So here he is deeply moved when he saw this incident, and he speaks on behalf of Moses. Now, in verse 7, can we read chapter 12, verse 7? Numbers chapter 12, verse 7.
My servant Moses, not also who is faithful in all mine house.
Okay, so it says, my servant Moses, he is faithful in all my house. Okay, that is God's testimony about Moses. But when we look at the at Moses' history, we can see when God called him, he was reluctant. Okay, we saw that he did not want to take the leadership position. And just in the last chapter, we see him complaining bitterly against to God about the burden of taking care of these people of Israel. He said, just kill me. Okay, I am too tired. I can't bear this burden. Just kill me. Okay, and he really meant it. He was really upset. Further, before that, when they started to travel from Sinai, we saw that Moses asked the help from his brother-in-law, come with us, help us. So we can see Moses trying to, lean on people for help. We also see Moses' reluctance to take up leadership position. We saw that Moses was not at all possessive about the position that leadership God has given him. He was very humble. So in spite of all his shortfalls, all his shortcomings, okay, God says he is faithful in all my house. He is absolutely faithful in all my house. God doesn't remember or any kind of accusation, any kind of shortcoming against Moses. Okay, so God is so gracious. So he remembers all that we do for him. Okay, and he remembers it in a very gracious manner. Just like he spoke to Moses, he said, he is faithful in all my house. Okay, and we saw further in that chapter about how God describes the prophet and how God says that Moses is above a regular prophet. Okay, and he warns Miriam and Aaron, why were you not afraid to speak in such a way against Moses? Because age is not the matter here, closeness to God was. Okay, so they were not on an equal footing with Moses. Moses was in greater position, even though he was younger to them. but they should have respected the authority God had placed upon Moses. And that same idea is still there even in the New Testament, where God expects people to respect authority and positions which He has given to people. So even though our leader might be much younger than us, because he's a leader, okay, God expects that everyone should give him the respect that he deserves. Okay, and God views it very seriously when somebody disrespects the authority that God has kept over over them. Okay, so in Romans chapter 13 verse 1, we see about being subject to government. First Peter chapter 5 verse 5 says, "Young men, be subject to your elders." Okay, so we see this idea of respecting authority even in the New Testament. Now, Numbers chapter 12, verse 14 and 15. Now, God departs from that tabernacle. He came down to speak to the three of them, and then he departs. He's angry and he just departs. And when he departs, Miriam turns, her body turns leprous. She catches leprosy. Aaron is terrified and he pleads to Moses to forgive, and Moses cries out to God to forgive. Okay, so God responds in Numbers chapter 12, verse 14 and 15. Can we read that? Numbers chapter 12, verse 14 and 15.
And the Lord said unto Moses, If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received in again. And Miriam was shut out of the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again.
Okay. So, spitting on somebody is a sign of contempt, a really great sign of contempt. Okay, and a father spitting on his own child would happen only under severe circumstances, where the child behaved extremely badly and hurt his father or angered his or her father to such an extent that the father has contempt for his own child and it spits on her. Okay, so spitting is a sign of great contempt, and God was so disgusted with Miriam's behavior that she received a judgment as if he had spit on her. Now we have to remember that God is a loving, merciful, and forgiving and patient God. Now, such a loving and merciful and patient God became disgusted with Miriam's behavior, and he said, "It's as if I have spit on her face." Okay, the punishment on her, let her be as if her father spit on her. Okay, that was the kind of contempt and disgust that God had on that behavior. But but the sentence that she received was so much more lighter. Being defiled for 7 days and being outside the camp for 7 days and coming back in full health. And so we see another aspect. When somebody is offended to such an extent that they spit on our face, getting forgiveness from them, if they were human, is so difficult. It's probably impossible to, get forgiveness from that person. But here we see how God quickly forgives. How quickly God forgives when Moses asked God, please forgive her. And God forgives. Okay. So we see that incident over here and how God punishes, but as well as is gracious at the same time in this chapter. Now we'll go to chapter 13. Now this is let's read chapter 13, Numbers chapter 13, verse 1 and 2.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel of every tribe to their fathers, shall ye send a man, every one a ruler among them.
So we see here that God says to Moses, send out people to spy out the land of Canaan. Now they are at the border of Canaan. They are going to possess the land. So God says to Moses, go send out spies. Now let's read Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 19 to 22. Okay, it's about the same incident. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 19 to 22.
And when we departed from Horeb, we went through all the great and terrible wilderness which ye saw by the way of the mountain of the Amorites, as the Lord our God commanded us, and we came to Kadesh Barnea, and I said unto you, ye are come unto the mountains of the Amorites, which the Lord our God doth give unto us. Behold, the Lord thy God hath sent the land before thee. Go up and possess it, as the Lord God of thy fathers hath said unto thee. Fear not, neither be discouraged. And ye came near unto me, every one of you, and said, we will send men before us, and they shall search us out the land, and bring us the word again by what way we must go up, and into what cities we shall come.
So they're speaking about the same incident. Okay. In Numbers chapter 13, we see that God said to Moses to send out the people. But when Moses is repeating or recounting that incident in Deuteronomy, he says that we came to that border. Then all of you approached me and said, let us send men ahead of us. Okay. And it pleased Moses, and therefore they sent. So the people came to Moses with the idea, let us send spies. And God relented. God allowed it to happen. Okay. So that is the difference. So it was not God who told Moses that send out the spies. It was not from God's initiative. It was the people's initiative. God only permitted it. And that's why he said, okay, send out the men for yourself to spy out the land. So that's what we see in the beginning of this chapter. Okay. And we see in verse 16. Okay. Let's turn to 13, verse 16. It gives a list of people who were sent out as spies, then names. And in verse 16, can we read that?
And these are the names of the men which Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Oshea, the son of Nun, Jehoshua.
Yeah. So it's the name of Joshua was Hoshea, but Moses renames or gives him a name Jehoshua. Okay. Now in the Hebrew language, if we look at Jehoshua and Jesus, the Hebrew language would be Yeshua. Okay. So Jehoshua and Yehoshua are basically very similar, very slight spelling difference, but the name basically means the same, which means Jehovah saves. Okay. So that is the meaning of the name Jesus, which in the original language is Yeshua, and the name of Joshua was Jehoshua. Okay, so these are very similar names. So we can see that interestingly that Joshua was the person who led the people into the promised land, and for us it is Jesus who leads us into the promised land. So we see the same names working. And there is a way why we call Jesus as Jesus. It is a Latin, when the names were translated. Okay, that's how Yehoshua became Jesus. because of different translation, going from the Hebrew language to Greek, from Greek to Latin, and Latin to English. Okay, so it became Yehoshua became Jesus in English. All right, going further, let's read verses from the same chapter 25 to 33. Now this is about, now the people went out, the spies went out, they spied out the land, they came back, and now they are giving the report. We know all this story because this is quite familiar to all of us. So we'll quickly go through. Let's read verse 25 to 33. Numbers chapter 13, verse 25 to 33.
And they returned from searching of the land after 40 days, and they went and came to Moses, unto Aaron, and all the congregation of the children of Israel, unto the wilderness of Paran, and to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them, and unto all the congregation, and shewed them the fruit of the land. And they told them and said, We came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it flowed with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there, and the Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, Why we be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up and the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight.
So we are familiar with this this portion of the scriptures. The 10 spies brought a bad report, a negative report. Caleb and Joshua brought a good report. Now, the conclusion of the 10 spies is like of natural men who walk by sight and not by faith. Okay? Natural men looking at natural things. So their language is of unbelief. Okay? So they are looking at natural things. And that's why they say, we saw. Okay? What did they see? We saw the giants. Okay, we saw the goodness of the land, but we also saw the giants. They are seeing with their natural eyes. And they are saying, we are not strong. Okay, we are not able. Okay, and verse 33 says, we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. Okay, so it is not just that they thought that they were weak. Okay, they also heard and believed what the giants spoke about them. So that's why it says, so we seemed to them. So probably they had an encounter with the inhabitants of that land, and those people kind of despised them and said that you guys are too weak, we'll let you go. I mean, there's no point fighting you, you are too weak. And probably that's why they were able to bring the cluster of grapes and fruit. But they say that in our own eyes, we were like grasshoppers. In the eyes of the giants also, we were like grasshoppers. So they believed the report of the giants. They believed the report of the enemy. They believed the viewpoint of the enemy, that you are not strong. But on the other hand, when we look at chapter 13, verse 30, we see a man of faith, Caleb. Caleb saying that, let us go at once and occupy it, for we are able to overcome it. And chapter 14, verses 7 to 9, if we read, it says, Caleb speaking, the land which we pass through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land, and he will give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear for the people of the land. For they are bread for us, their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. So here is a man of faith speaking words of faith. He says, do not fear. Okay, God is with us. God will give us the land. We are able, and the enemy is defenseless. Their protection is gone from them. So how does he know that their protection is gone? Because he walks by faith. He has spiritual eyes, and he could see with his spiritual eyes that the protection which was upon the Canaanites, that has departed from them, and God is with Israel, and they will surely win this battle. Okay, they will surely win this war. Okay, so this is a man of faith. So we see the difference between the man of natural man and a man of faith. And the natural man walks by sight and says things of unbelief and believes the report of the enemy. But a man of faith believes what God says and believes on the promises of God. Okay. So now we come to Numbers 14 in verses 2 and 3. Now this incident is continuing. Now people are in a turmoil. They have heard the report of the 10 spies. They have believed the 10 spies, and they are in big turmoil. And they say something. Verses 2 and 3. Chapter 14, verses 2 and 3.
And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore had the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return to Egypt?
So the people continue to complain and blame God. Okay. So they say, why has God done like this? Why has God done like this? Why could it was better if we had died in Egypt? It was better if we had died in the wilderness. And the thing is, God here heard that, and he said, because you said this, let it be so with you. You will all die in wilderness. Because you said that is better than what I have planned for you, you will have what you have desired. So you will all die in wilderness. Okay. God answers their prayer, which they probably did not want, but what they said, they got. So God is not the reason for the troubles of our life. They continue to blame God, and many times we also blame God. Okay. But there are more factors at play. Okay. Like human faith. Okay. So, like God has great plans for our life, but he uses our faith in him to unlock that future. The great future which God has planned for each one of us, it is unlocked when we put our faith in him. So there was a great future ahead of the people of Israel. Okay. But they could not obtain it, as in the book of Hebrews it says, because of their unbelief. They could not enter the land of their rest. Okay. And so we should be careful what we speak and what we believe, because we see that the people got what they spoke, they received. Okay. So further down that chapter, we see that God gets ready to destroy the people. So Moses intercedes and God relents. Okay. Again, God relents. Moses says, if you destroy the people, the Egyptians will say things about you. They will say that you did not like your own children, so you destroyed them, and all those kind of negative things the Egyptians will say. So please don't destroy your people. So God relents to what Moses says, but he says something in verse 20 and 21. Can we read chapter 14, verse 20 and 21?
But as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracle which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice.
Okay. So verse 20 and 21 says, I have pardoned according to your word, but truly as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Okay. So God says, I have forgiven them because you have asked me, I have forgiven them. But remember that the whole earth will be filled with my glory. So it is not what the Egyptians will say that convince God. There we cannot convince God. Okay. And God is not bothered by, mere men speaking things. So what Egyptians would say is not something that God cares about. Okay. It was not for the sake of the Egyptians' talk that God spared Israel. God forgave Israel because Moses interceded. Okay. He says, I have forgiven them according to your word. But irrespective of whether the Egyptians will say things or not, the whole earth will be filled with my glory. Okay. The Egyptians will not be talking about this. Even the Egyptians' knee will bow, and even the Egyptian's tongue will confess that God alone is God. Okay. So that's what he is saying. Because I have forgiven them, because Moses has interceded. Then in verse 22 and 23, he says that these 10 times they have tested me and they have not listened to my voice. So we have actually seen all these 10 times. So I have put in these verses. We will not go through them. I'll just remind you. In Exodus chapter 14, verses 11 and 12, when they were in front of the Red Sea, okay, they were trapped. And they said, God has trapped us. God has brought us here. And they started grumbling. That was the first time. Crossing the Red Sea, they started grumbling for water at Mara. Before they reached Sinai, they wanted, bread and meat. Okay, that is in Exodus 16. Okay. When God gave them manna, God told them, do not leave the manna overnight. I will send you manna every day. Finish whatever you gather, finish it on the same day. Do not leave it overnight. But some of the people did not listen to that. And God was angry about it. Then in Exodus chapter 17, they again complained about water at a place called Rephidim. Okay. In Exodus chapter 32, we see that they made the golden calf and they went for idolatry. Okay, that was again another thing that they did. Then in Numbers 11, recently we saw that when they started to go towards the promised land from Sinai, they started complaining about the difficulty of the travel. That was at Tabera, where God sent a fire. Then immediately after that, they said they want meat and they started complaining. So God sent them quail. Now this is 8 incidents. So the next 2 are probable things. One is asking for spies. Okay, asking that let us send spies ahead of us. That could be one reason. Okay, where they tested God because they did not believe God. Okay, and the 10th thing was their refusal to enter the promised land. Their refusal to go and fight. Okay. So these are the 10 things. God says last 10 times they have not listened to my voice. And these are the 10 incidents that we have seen where Israel rebels and does not obey God. Now let's read. We don't have time, but let's still read verses 39 to 44. This is the last thing, and after this we'll conclude. verse 39 to 44. Chapter 14, verse 39 to 44. Now the people people rebelled. God came down and God said, I'm going to destroy them. Moses intercedes and God says, okay, I have forgiven them, but they are not going to enter into the promised land. So now the people are very sad. They're sorrowful. Okay, so that's they now they want to go to their promised land. They don't want to stay out. So let's read verse 39 to 44.
And Moses told these sayings unto all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. And they rose up early in the morning and gat them up into the top of the mountain, saying, Lo, we be here, and will go up unto the place which the Lord hath promised. For we have sinned. And Moses said, Wherefore now do ye transgress and command the commandment of the Lord? But it shall not prosper. Go not up, for the Lord is not among you, and ye be not smitten before your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and they shall fall by sword, because they are turned away from the Lord. Therefore the Lord will not be with you. But they presumed to go up unto the hilltop. Nevertheless, the ark of the covenant of the Lord and Moses departed not out of the camp.
So in verse 44, we see the word, they presumed to go. They presumed. And in another translation, it says they foolishly dared to go up, even though the Lord was not with them. So what are they doing? They are going to fight the enemy to take possession of the promised land. But right now, the Lord is not with them. So even though he had told them to do this action sometime back, they did not do it. Now when they are ready to do the action, they are doing it when the Lord has told them not to do it. Okay. So they foolishly dared. Okay. So when we step out, okay, they went in presumption. They went in assumption and they got defeated. So when we step out, we need a definite call from God to do the things that he wants us to do. Presuming that God is with us and getting into battles we are not called for, can cause a lot of problems in our life. Okay. So we need to spend time in God's presence and we will hear his voice and he will guide us on what we should do and what we should not do. Okay. So every time, just because some of the things are mentioned in the Bible and it looks good spiritually, okay, may not be from God. Okay. It might be we are presuming that we need to do this, we need to do that, when God has not told us to do it at any time. Okay. So before we get into take some steps, some significant steps, we should be sure that God has told us to do those things. And God always speaks when we spend time with him, and he always guides when we ask directions from him. Okay. So with that, we'll conclude today's